Good morning and welcome to our Monday morning's thought for today. This week we're continuing what we looked at yesterday, Sunday morning, this whole passage to do with the observance of the Sabbath. And it's interesting to note as you look through this passage that very similar to the passage we looked at before where Jesus was questioned about his disciples and their fasting, so Jesus is questioned about his disciples and what they were doing in this passage as well. It's interesting that these questions weren't directly related to Jesus. They weren't seen as attacks at Jesus, but rather they were seen as basically questioning Jesus' role as a rabbi because of his disciples and what his disciples were doing. And it's interesting to note because can I go back and read for you what we read last week? If you remember last week, we looked at this passage where it said, now John's disciples, this is Mark 2 verse 18. Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and people came and said to him, why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? So people were watching and they were comparing Jesus disciples with the disciples of the Pharisees and the disciples of John. And they were saying, well, we've been watching your disciples. We notice that they don't fast, which is a curious thing when you think about it, because fasting is meant to be a private thing between you and God. And yet it was noticeable to the people who were watching. And then again today, as we read yesterday in church, verse 23, on the Sabbath, he, that's Jesus, was going through the grain fields. And as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. Once again, we then read, and the Pharisees were saying to him, look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? So the disciples were being watched by the other people. And very often in life, you think it's the leaders, it's the Boris Johnsons of the world, and yet very often it's his cabinet that gets watched, and the press get photographs of them doing this, that, and the other, and he then has to answer for them. And very often it's seen as a leadership issue, and I think this is what's been going on here. There's a leadership issue between Jesus and his disciples, and the Pharisees are trying to work out, now if you're a real rabbi, your disciples will be doing what you should be teaching them, and you should be teaching them the Jewish law. And so there's a sense there that it's not just Jesus that they're watching, but they're also watching his disciples. And I think this is a very important fact. And it's a great way to start the week, because I don't know what your week looks like. Obviously, with the whole restrictions coming in again of the week, everybody's life's up and down, topsy-turvy at the moment, and we don't know quite what's going on. But for your week this week, I can guarantee you that people will be watching you. Now, I'm talking about you as a general person. If you are a church member, then you will be watched in a different way, because you will be basically judged according to what you have already said you believe. If you say you believe in Jesus Christ, people will be watching you to see how you live your life, to see if it matches up with what the Bible teaches, or what they think the Bible teaches, which is sometimes very different from what the Bible does teach. Or they'll be watching your life to see whether you are in line with other people they know who are followers of Jesus. And so you will be watched by people, and people will be making judgments about you. People will be saying, oh, they're so-and-so, they're meant to be a Presbyterian, or they're meant to be a Baptist, or they're meant to believe this, or they're meant to believe that. But I just saw them do this, that, and the other. And as far as I'm concerned, and then they make judgments. And so whatever you do today, whether you want to be judged or not, you will be judged. People are watching, and because they're watching, they're making assumptions. And because they're making assumptions, then they are trying to understand you better. But they're also maybe trying to test you. So be careful how you live your life. That's really the thought for today. Be careful how you live, because other people are watching. And maybe you're watching this morning and you're not maybe a believer, but you're very quick to judge people. I would rather that you, instead of judging those people, instead of slamming them for doing something that you think is wrong, take a moment and say, can I ask you about this? Can you explain to me, because I'm confused? Rather than trying to pick holes, rather than trying to pull them down, try and engage them in conversation, because we want to be able to explain why we do things. And this passage we're looking at this week is an incredible passage because it's not really about the Sabbath, but it's basically got to do with who is Lord of the Sabbath, who is actually in control, who is in charge of what we believe and why we believe it. So there's your thought for today. Think about who's watching you, because people are watching you. Don't be too quick to judge others simply because they don't match up with what you believe they should be doing, but rather engage them in conversation. We want to be people who are transparent in how we live our lives. It's not always the ministers that get judged, but very often it's the members of the congregation who also get judged. So always be careful how you live your life. Live your life as close to Jesus as you can, and you won't be going far wrong. That's your thought for today, Monday morning. Hope you have a good day. See you tomorrow. God bless.